encourage you to use. So just some context on why we Upwardly Global hold public board meetings. We really see this as a key way to bring together our community, our job seekers, our funders, our community partners, alumni, staff, everyone in our community, to really be able to share information on our work and where we are going forward. This public board meeting is unique from the past public board meetings that we've held because we'll take a little bit of a deep dive into the election impact. I am excited to be able to introduce our CEO and president, Jina, where she'll share some insights and what Upwardly Global will be doing to continue to support this community under a second Trump administration. And this includes how we, along with our community of an ecosystem of partners, will advocate and protect the community from actions and policies that might have negative impacts, as well as how we will partner with the next administration and advocate for our community and identify opportunities to be able to support everyone. So with that, I will hand it over, Jina, to you to share some of your thoughts.
Thank you, Tammi, and thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. It just really demonstrates how many people are committed to this community of immigrants, refugees, and asylees, and we're just so grateful, especially at a time where it can feel kind of lonely in the space. So I think first and foremost, what I do want to let everybody know quite clearly is that Upwardly Global remains committed to immigrants, refugees, and asylees, and there is still work to be done, and we are going to continue to do the work. And we feel really strongly to be able to say that. And I say that knowing that we just spent the last 2 days as an entire team coming together in person across our 4 cities, across our 4 offices, to really start brainstorming and thinking through what are some of the action steps we want to take in order to ensure that we are protecting and continuing to advance this work, which is really critical. And what I'm talking about is a work of workforce inclusion for immigrants, refugees, and asylees. So first and foremost, I want to say that, we are a nonpartisan organization, and we do believe and know that immigration is a bipartisan issue, and we will continue to work with this administration, just as we have worked with the past administrations. We also know that we are deeply committed to ensuring that the communities that are here are it's not only a question of who's coming in, but it's also a question of how are we setting people up for success so that they can thrive and contribute at their skill level, because that helps us tell this bigger story of shared prosperity and how this community builds resilience for all of us. And I will highlight that we have just released a report in partnership with the American Immigration Council. And that report is how immigrants are fueling the economy of the Great Lakes states. And as we send out our email to everybody after this call, we'll make sure we include that as well, because it's really important that we start to bust some of these myths, really put forward the evidence, but also the stories of the real people and who we are, and engage in that dialogue. The other thing I want to say as we're looking to 2025 is this year, 2024, Upwardly Global has never served more people than ever before. We are serving 11,000 job seekers. Our goal for next year is to serve 25,000, and that will be our 25th anniversary. And so for us, it will be a moment of joy and celebration. And that 25,000 is still a number we believe that is achievable. And I want to explain why. But first, in order to do that, I need to talk a little bit about the context of what we expect to happen under this administration, and how that will impact our work and some of the things that we're looking to do in order to pivot or to augment how we're working right now. The first is we know that this administration is looking to both dismantle and consolidate the Office of Refugee Resettlement, USCIS, and the Department of Human Services, specifically those departments that work with refugee populations or forced migrant populations. And if that's the case, we intend to really put out a blueprint of what we think would be positive changes in order to support and center on this community. And what I mean by that is really starting to enter into the conversation. How are we also ensuring that we're setting people up for economic success and we're centering economic opportunities, and we're making the argument that these individuals are taking jobs and supporting the tax base, and that in order to continue to do that successfully, we actually need to center that as we are thinking about how we allow communities to thrive here. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying that this is going to absolutely happen just because Upwardly Global wants it to happen, but that is the message that we intend to push as we see and we know that this administration is going to dismantle the existing structures. And if they're going to be rebuilding something, we want to be part of that conversation about what that rebuild looks like, even if we know it only a small portion might actually have positive impact on our populations. The other piece is, in order to be able to do all of that work, we know that we need to be really making the connection around the role of immigration on the economy. We saw that as, some of the top two issues for voters in this election cycle. We also saw that there are significant misconceptions about the contributions that immigrants are providing to our economy and our workforce. We know that the business community needs to be playing and can be playing a much bigger role in messaging that as well. And so not only is that Great Lakes Report an example of what we're trying to push out, but that is something that, and if you've looked at our social media channels, like right now, we're all about myth busting. And we will continue to do that in a robust way, and really also in partnership with our coalition partners. And then I want to say finally, there will continue to be innovation happening at the city and the state level, and there will continue to be innovation happening at the state level, including in red states. And I'm thinking, for example, of Utah, which is a partner, as a city and a partner that has come to us in the past, really talking about how can we support forcefully displaced migrants to think about Utah as a place for home, if we can start helping connect them to jobs early on and helping them see that there are career opportunities there for them. That work is not going to stop in the States. And so then it's an opportunity for us to say, if we believe innovation is going to continue to happen, how are we partnering with cities and states, including in red states, in order to be able to advance that? And Upwardly Global, we're really excited about this concept of how do we build immigrant workforce inclusion, and how do we develop those models, and how do we start innovating around that? And as an example, we've even been investing in AI capabilities. We've also been testing AI capabilities on the market around career navigation, putting out reports about why they don't work for our communities because they don't center on the design and the data and the build around our communities. And so how do we change that picture? We know that in the tech space, and I, for example, will be at Taxonomy next week, which is a huge conference that brings tech innovators and entrepreneurs talking about this. There is still interest in these spaces of understanding how AI can be inclusive of underrepresented communities. That is a space for us to continue to push out innovation, so that products that are being brought to bear and that states are adopting and purchasing as vendors are going to be working for our communities too. And so I want to say we will continue to innovate. We will continue to push those boundaries, and we will continue to work in spaces where we know there is interest and engagement because it's the early days, and we have an opportunity to really get on that map. So we remain committed to that. Okay, so I know I've said a lot, but just to recap, we will be working with this administration to center economic inclusion around our immigrant populations as they're looking at redesign. We are going to be pushing out more messaging and building both the business case, but also shedding light on the stories of how immigrants are contributing to economies and the workforce. And we will continue to be pushing out innovation around workforce innovation, whether it's at the local level or within the tech space where we know we can continue to be creative. Now, Upwardly Global, we continue to serve a population of job seekers. We're serving, I said, 11,000 this year. We're going to be serving 25,000 next year. So what does this mean in terms of the impact that we know will be coming around people who are allowed in the country? So the first is 60% of the population that Upwardly Global serves right now are forcefully displaced individuals. There are people who have come in the refugee program. There are people who have come as special immigrant visa holders, which is basically the refugee program specific for Iraqis and Afghans who have worked alongside the US military and the US government. They are individuals who have come through humanitarian parole. And these are largely Ukrainians, as an example, but also Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And then there are individuals who have come through temporary protected status. For the first Trump administration, only 30% of the population we served were forcefully displaced. So in some ways, we're more exposed because we are serving a much larger group of these individuals. Humanitarian parole in particular has been heavily used by the Biden administration as a way to get people in quickly, rather than using the refugee resettlement pathway, which takes on average 2 years in order to process somebody through. And so understanding that, yes, but also knowing that if these individuals had come under refugee resettlement, they wouldn't need their protection status renewed by USCIS every 2 years. We know, as happened last time, that temporary protected status will be revoked for those individuals. That's about 4.4% of our population. The question mark for us now is what will happen to humanitarian parole, given the fact that so many Ukrainians and other populations are in that track. And that is not something that had been true under the Obama administration when Trump was coming in. So we didn't see what they did to humanitarian parole last time because it wasn't as big as population. And that's different. About 17% of that population, the population we serve now, are humanitarian parole. And the reason I picked that out particularly is because for many of them, their status is good for 2 years and then it has to be renewed. That is something the administration can do, and it is unlikely to be renewed. So we don't think there's a big question mark if these people will specifically be deported, sought out and deported. I think it's more likely that their visas will just not be renewed and they'll have to leave the country. And a significant number of Ukrainians and Venezuelans will be looking for renewal in 2025. And so that will hugely impact this community. I know I'm painting a bleak picture, and I promise you to get to inspiration and hope in a second. And so what that means for us in total is that we think that 40% of the community that we have been serving is at risk, which is a significant number for us. And at this stage, the question is, we know that these people will no longer be coming into the country. The border will be closed. TPS, humanitarian parole, refugee status will no longer be issued. So no longer will these people be coming into the country. The question is, for those that are in our pipeline right now, what does that impact look like if they're not able to get their status renewed, or if work authorization is delayed because of processing times as USCIS is restructured and potentially defunded. So that's the picture that we're looking at. I also want to say, out of that 40%, most of those have come to us within being in the United States for 2 years or less. So Upwardly Global in the past 4 years has gotten really good about being able to identify people early and getting them on a track towards career advancement early, which is amazing. That's what we want. That's what we want in every country. Now we have to get good at finding those individuals who have been here for 5 to 7 years, and potentially 9 years, understanding the additional barriers they face and really working to be able to get them back into their careers and out of survival jobs, or individuals who have come as refugees, as an example, who have improved their English, have had a survival job, and are ready to reskill or upskill in order to get back to get that first professional job. And so that is the work we're going to be doing as an example. And I will say, historically, the populations we have served have been here for 5 years on average when they come before they come to us. So we know that's a muscle that Upwardly Global has had in the past, and that's a muscle we will be rebuilding, so that we can ensure that those individuals who are here as well and have been here for a while and settled and ready to actually reinvest are able to do that. And I want to say, as a reminder, as you have questions, put them in the Q&A section. Because we've had close to 300 people RSVP for this event, we're not giving people an opportunity to speak, but we do want to hear your questions and we do want to answer as many as we can. The other open question under this administration will be, what will they do to asylum? And not asylum so much of individuals coming through the border, because we know for those coming through the border, that will be stopped, the border will be closed, and those coming in and then trying to seek asylum will likely be deported. But what happens for asylum seekers who are flying into the country, or coming in through other means? What will that look like for them? And what will that look like for people who are already in the asylum process? Now, I will say last time, people who were already in the asylum process were protected in many ways because the attention was really around those who were arriving. But under this administration, because of how they'll be hitting the ground running this time around, we don't know what that will actually look like for asylum seekers. And that is one trigger that we will be watching very closely to see what that means and how that ends up looking. But that is probably the biggest question mark. I've been reaching out to our partners at HIAS, at our COSA and others to understand, how they're seeing it. And I think ultimately all of us sort of are at a point where we're sort of saying, we don't know what will happen with asylum seekers who are here. I can say last time, it just meant that their paperwork wasn't processed. And so they were waiting longer and longer and longer to be able to have their court date. And in some ways, that might be considered a positive, because they're protected then from being automatically denied or denied quickly, which is something we did see for people who are arriving, applying for asylum, and then keep being seen quickly. So that remains one of the biggest questions for us, which is what's going to happen to humanitarian parole for those who are here, and what's going to happen to asylum. And I say for asylum, will they allow people to fly in and seek asylum? I will also say we expect to also see travel bans again from specific countries. For example, we know that many Sudanese have sought asylum in the United States because of what's happening in Sudan. And we would expect then for them not even to be able to get to the United States to seek asylum if they wish to because of travel bans. So we're seeing overall a real hit in this community being able to arrive. And now we're wondering, and the likelihood that those who have 2-year renewals not being renewed on their humanitarian status, the question is for what does that mean for everybody else? Okay, something positive. We are still seeing sustained interest from our employer partners to be able to hire this talent pool. And we do talk about our talent as an untapped talent pool. We are very much aware and preparing for what might happen around DEIB. Not only because of the affirmative action again around colleges, but also because of statements by the now incoming vice president around refugee and immigrant populations specifically. But while we see that, we also see our employer partners pivoting around their language and really continuing as business as usual and continuing to invest in Upwardly Global, we haven't seen a shift at all with the election results. And in fact, what we've seen is our employers continuing to sort of say, okay, what's the work plan for next year? What are the hiring commitments we're making for next year? What's the talent that we can get presented? And that's really encouraging. And they are not shying away from this community at all. And so I want to say that is a bright light. And especially since we can also try to convert that into really pushing for advocacy around this. I also want to say for employer partners, they're really interested in making sure that they can have the best talent that they can for their open roles. We know that right now, 85% of growth in our working age population comes from immigrants and the children of immigrants. 100% of growth based on how our population is aging right now. 100% of our growth will come from immigrants and the children of immigrants by 2035, which is kind of around the corner. And so I do think this is going to become a economic pain point for companies that we need to work to galvanize them around. So I do think that's a real positive in this picture. I also want to say, as Upwardly Global, our goal in terms of any form of advocacy is really to lift all boats. We do not want to create a dynamic where we are seen as quote unquote the good immigrants because we bring skills that are in need or in demand. But we want to say that we are immigrants who are here that have assets and want to contribute. And that is true for many immigrant communities. And so the challenge for us is, how do we do that? How do we advocate for our community in a way that allows us to lift all boats? And we are recruiting for a chief marketing officer, so hopefully that will be something that they can help us solve. The other piece is our growth as an organization has doubled year after year over the past 3 years, which has been really exciting. Last year, we served close to 6,800 individuals. This year, it's going to be 11,000. And so for us, that growth has really happened because we have deepened partnerships in local communities with community colleges, with workforce development boards and job centers, and with refugee and immigrant serving groups. We will continue to see community colleges thrive. We have an incredible partnership with Miami-Dade Community College, which is the largest community college in the country. And we really see an opportunity to think about how are we then investing in these local communities by ensuring that we're taking the innovation and the capabilities and our know-how, structuring that so we are being able to institutionalize that and build that infrastructure within community colleges, build that infrastructure within job centers, so that when our communities do come to those spaces, that they're able to access Upglow-like services from those partners. And so we will be doubling down on our partnership model in local communities. And partnership for us is important in local communities because our partners have trust, they have proximity to the community, and they have insights. And so it's really about how are we bolstering that ecosystem of infrastructure for immigrants and refugees that will stay regardless of who is in the administration. And so that is work we're going to be continuing to doing and doubling down on, and we're really excited about it. And if we have any partners on this call, I want to say we want to hear from you, and we want to be making sure that we're lifting up that work. I also said we're going to continue to advance innovation through technology. We recently submitted a concept at a big conference, and the partner at that big conference wrote back and said, with all the things that are happening in the election, we're sort of surprised that Upwardly Global is still looking to innovate. And the reality is hell yes, we're looking to innovate because immigrant inclusion is something we need in our cities, in our states, in our community colleges, in our job centers. And we're not going to stop building and innovating on those models. And so we will be continuing that work. And so another piece of this is we do have a project roadmap and we will be continuing to invest in that product roadmap around AI. And as part of the email we send out after this call, we will send our AI impact for good, but we're also going to be rolling out another report at the beginning of next year around another capability that many of you might know about, which is our Hired Score partnership, which is now with Workday, around being able to present talent seamlessly to our employer partners in their applicant tracking systems. So that work will continue. And we will engage with this administration. We will engage in a way that allows us to lift all boats and not divide our communities. And while we'll have to figure that out, I do think, we are going to have a blueprint of what kinds of policies that we want to see from this administration, how we want them to be thinking about restructuring, if they're going to be restructuring various departments and divisions, and connecting that deeply with business. So I would also say and invite those who are also working in that space to connect with us around that. And with that, I've been talking at you for over or close to 20 minutes. And so I want to sort of invite now to see if there are questions. I also want to say, while these are big picture intentions for Upwardly Global, within the next couple of weeks, we will have a much clearer roadmap. And I also want to say, we don't expect to feel the hit in 2025 because of how we think these will be paced and how long it will take and the legal actions that will be attempting to stop some of these interventions around who's coming into the country. But in 2026 and 2027, we expect to see that ripple effect. And the great news is we have 2025 to prepare and really to prepare with partners in this room so that we're all set up to thrive. Okay, I'm going to stop now.
Great. Thank you, Jina. And, we've had a number of questions kind of come in over the chat. And thank you. Please continue to add some. Some, I think, are very specific questions around various visas and, things like that. But I'll try and take some of the kind of higher level kind of questions for this group. So the first one is just around the willingness and interest of this new administration to be able to work with Upwardly Global, and kind of connected to that, the level of federal funding that you think that might be available for Upwardly Global.
Yeah, so I think Upwardly Global is probably one of the best positioned organizations to work with this administration because we work so closely with business and employers, and because we are focused on workforce. I will also say we're probably best positioned because this is a population that most Americans, including those that are on the conservative and the Republican side, support, which are individuals who come into the United States with skills and who want to contribute and use those skills. And in the past, we have had Trump supporters and a large number of Republican supporters at Upwardly Global, and we continue to do. And so it will be really pulling those levers. I think in terms of federal funding, I think we are expecting that there will not be federal funding at this stage. I think there is softness in government funding, and we're aware of that, and we're planning for that. And I do think there will be so much time and effort around restructuring. And frankly, it will cost them $300 billion to execute on their enforcement plan around the border. And so I think we won't see any federal funding for this for several years if we do.
Yeah, thanks, Jina. You talked about the 25,000 people by our 25th anniversary, which I think is an amazing goal for us, and the 11,000 that we're serving this year. One question that's come in is just around how Upwardly Global's kind of overall staffing base has kind of grown in that time, and how we're working with, each of our job seekers so that we can make sure that we're kind of delivering the level of kind of service or engagement with all of our job seekers so that we can provide them with a great experience.
Yeah, I love that question because it goes into how we do things. So I would say I have been at Upwardly Global for 6 years. And when I started, we were 45 people, and now we are going to be 109 people this year. And so we have grown significantly. And what we have been doing is investing time in codifying our coaching model. We believe our secret sauce are our coaches, and the time they spend with their job seekers. So what we have been doing is twofold. One is how do we codify our coaching model, especially if we're extending that to partners, to ensure that that level of quality exists, regardless if you're meeting an upglow coach or if you're meeting one of our partner coaches. And we do have an online learning management system, and we have a great product team that's been working really about how to enhance the user experience and get to know our users to be able to do that effectively. And we've been investing in what are those AI capabilities or technology capabilities that can support resume writing, that can support career navigation, that can support presents to employers, so that that's less time that our coaches have to spend doing that, and our coaches can really be focused on the one-on-one interactions with the job seeker. And so actually in November, we will be launching our AI resume builder, which we're really excited about, and that will be launching with our partners as well. And that's just an example of how we are continuing to innovate. So I would say we've grown. We've also grown teams. We've never had a product team before. Now we do. We've never had a learning team before. Now we have a couple of people focused on sort of our learning content, etc. And so we continue to think about that. And I want to say, but we are job seeker centered, and because 35% of the people that work at Upwardly Global are our alumni, and we have alumni on our board, we continue to really lean on their expertise.
Great. Thanks, Jina. We have a great question here kind of connected to AI, and I know you briefly touched on some of the interesting things that we're doing there. There's, I think, also a lot of concerns connected to the use of AI and the potential, dangers, especially in connection to the way it's used for immigrant and refugee populations. Can you talk a little bit about the work that we're doing there and how we're maybe helping to combat that?
Yeah, so I want to say two things. We do expect under this Trump administration to see AI and being used for really enforcement. And so there are concerns there. And we know that there are great groups out there that are looking to advise on how do we protect and how do we ensure privacy of data. And a lot of that around ethical AI is about opt-in and opt-out. And those are conversations where we're trying to develop guidelines about how do we actually do that effectively for our communities to be able to opt in and opt out of how they're sharing their data and how they're engaging with technology capabilities. I would say we're also working around how do we ensure that AI tools that are being developed on the open market that are designed for the average use case, which are not our communities because they drive the most business value, and leave us to be edge cases on that bell curve. How do we ensure we're actually centering edge case communities like ours in the design and in the testing and in the fact finding of what those tools need to look like by including our communities. And so we're continuing to do that. We are looking to advise big partners like a Coursera or in LinkedIn who are developing AI capabilities to be able to test them with our population so that they can ensure that their products are being centered around this community as well, especially since those are two products that our communities use a lot. And so these are just some of the things that we're trying to do to make sure that our communities continue to be centered. I will say we have been trying to galvanize other immigrant and refugee serving organizations around this issue because we really feel like our communities will be left behind if we don't organize ourselves to have a point of view. And if this is a space where we can lean in to ensure equity at this time, then we really need to be doing that. And we will continue to advocate. And we are also looking at creating some forums for our different serving organizations to come together to be able to clarify what that point of view would look like.
Thanks, Jina. I think this one's always, I think, a great question, when talking to the CEO of an organization, which is really, what keeps you up at night?
This presentation kept me up at night because I was thinking of all the things around the visa categories and the percentages that might be impacted. And I think what makes me sad is that my career in particular for the past 20 years has really been built around this belief that when somebody crosses an international border to seek safety, they're looking for two things. One is to be safe, and the second is to thrive, to find a livelihood, to find a way to survive. And we've been actually able to demonstrate as an organization, both here in the United States, but also in Poland, where we do have a pilot project, that if you actually start economic inclusion services early, career services early, that there are enough of a population that's interested in engaging with that in order to be set up for success early, and that most of that's going to be lost, because we won't be able to do that work because people won't be coming in, and so the question is, how do we ensure that that's documented and thrives in spaces, as we look to continue to serve people who have been here for longer. Um, but I think a lot keeps me up at night, as I'm sure it's keeping everybody up at night. I try not to get too distracted about what's happening at the federal level and really actually get excited about what we can be doing with all the incredible people that are trying to push for positive change. And we know that our communities are needed. So
Yeah. No, that's a great segue, maybe, Gina, to a question around what can folks be doing in their local communities to be able to support Upwardly Global?
yay! Which gets to my call to action. So thank you. So I think, one is first of all, if you have local organizations that are in your communities, they need support. They also just need emotional support to know that they're not alone and that there are people who want to roll up their sleeves and actually do something. So I would encourage you to do that. At Upwardly Global, we are always looking for mentors and volunteers. And that is a great way to engage with us, but also to engage in our community, with our communities, to be able to support them, especially as we think about what additional supports they might be needing as we're moving forward. I will say one of the things that we're toying around with is there a way for us to activate volunteers to be able to foster and cultivate relationships with these partners that we want to grow with, like community colleges, like job centers, and that is to come. So I would wait for that. Um, and then I would say, of course, as every organization right now, we are looking for committed donors. And so we have launched a a welcoming society, for monthly donations, whether it's $10 a month or $20 a month, just to make sure that we can sustain not only the optimism, but also continue to do this work. And I will say, it's special for our communities and our staff, frankly, to know that there are so many people out there that actually care and are doing something to step up in this moment. Um, so thank you for that question. And
Great.
definitely share our stuff on our channels because we're doing a lot of myth busting and it's going to take a lot of time to do that.
And so, Gina, for folks who do want to become partners and get involved, is there a person or a group of people that folks should reach out to?
Yeah, so when we send out this email that I keep talking about, we'll include a link to how to volunteer, how to mentor, or if you're an organization, how to connect with one of our partnership leads.
Great, great. I have some I know there are some very amazing questions in the chat that are quite specific to types of visas and, things like that, that maybe we can try and take offline and be able to help get back to this group around. But I just want to say, Gina, this is amazing that the work that Upwardly Global is doing and what you're doing to kind of bring people together in the community, to be able to support. And I really appreciate everyone who's joined us on this call today to be able to do that. So thank you, and to all of our staff.
Yeah, and I will say, we just had this 2 days with the whole teams together, and it was very powerful because I think all of us walked away from that saying put up sheets of paper on the wall and we started to jot down ideas about specific scenarios that I mentioned just now. And the reality is there's a lot of creativity that we can and will be engaging in order to protect this community, to serve this community, and continue to open space for these communities. And so I'm optimistic about what we can do even in these conditions. But I also want to say, many of us, because we've either worked in conflict zones or come from countries or have been refugees, or immigrants ourselves who, it's never easy moving to a new place. Like there is so much adaptability and resilience within Upwardly Global and our team, and our job seekers that I think, it's roll up your sleeves. We've done this before. We know how to do hard things and we know how to adapt to difficult circumstances. And this is no different. And we're gonna keep moving.
Yeah. Gina, you brought up a great kind of connection to other countries as well. What are your thoughts about how kind of this administration and the work that we're doing might affect policies and programs that are in other countries, thinking about places like Mexico or Latin America more broadly, but also in Europe? Any ways that, I know we've done a little bit of collaboration, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what we're doing broader than America.
Yeah. I mean, it will be interesting. There have been two innovations, I think, really three innovations that the Biden administration has really advanced. One is the safety mobility offices, which is how do we do visa processing of individuals in, Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador, so that as people are transiting, instead of coming all the way to the Mexico border, they're actually going to these safety mobility offices that are set up to get processed. It'll be interesting to see if this administration maintains that. We will be advocating for that to stay open. And I think it would look, I think there's a win there for them that they could adopt. And so for us, it would be then about, one of the things that we have been looking to do in that space is starting career services in these safety mobility offices, because if people are sitting around waiting for 5 to 10 weeks in order to get their visas processed, we should be then helping them understand what jobs they qualify for and coming away with a really great resume so that they're hitting the ground with something and not nothing. I think the second innovation has been with countries like Ecuador and Colombia around how are we skilling people in order to support both the local economy, but also have people come to US for specific jobs. Because that's focused on skills, I do wonder if that will continue. And we have been in conversations as well around how are we similarly supporting these individuals with understanding career navigation. And then the last is we do have this pilot in Poland, and we do have a network of what we call sister organizations in Poland, in Europe. And I will say in Europe, outside of the UK, largely, many of these organizations are maybe 5 to 7 years old. So we're sort of the elders in the room, and we have been advising them, but really thinking about how do we start building capacity of partners in Europe, as an example, to be able to serve this population, especially as we expect funding and support by the US government for Ukraine to end, and an increased number of Ukrainians going into Europe, and many of whom are skilled. I will say, even up to like 6 months ago, the Ukrainians we were serving in Poland still were planning to go back, and that's no longer the case. And so we're having huge demand for our programs, and I can only imagine our partners are too. And so is that a space we can continue to innovate in, with the idea that this innovation is something that we can then bring back here to our local communities and bring back at the federal level when there's an opening in a space for that. We're always busy.
Yes, definitely are. Um, I know we talked about the like the kind of secret sauce and the real power that comes from our coaching model. Would love to hear more about how we're working with employers as well.
Yeah. So a lot of our work with employers, we actually just developed this employer portal. So, we have our own learning management system, which has a job seeker portal. So now we have an employer portal, and that does a couple of things for employer partners. It not only provides recruiter training for them, so recruiter readiness training, understanding work authorization, which is going to be a huge one for us, because even as the interest is there's going to be a complexity around visa status and work authorization and renewals that we're going to have to really stay close to with our employer partners, but also helping unpack who is this population, what are the skills that they bring. It's crazy. I get questions around, oh, you work with skilled immigrants. So how do you help them come to the United States? And they're always surprised when I say they're already here. I mean, they've come through family reunification. They've come through the lottery system. They've come because they were seeking safety. Like they're already here in the United States and they're living here. They've made this their home. It's just about helping them get access to the jobs that are at their skill level. So I think that work we will continue to do with employers, and then we present our talent to employer partners, and we do that both with an AI capability, but we're also looking to build more of that out for small and medium-sized businesses. So if any funders are here, I would say 70% of our population gets job with small, medium-sized businesses. Small, medium-sized businesses are the engine for the local economies. And if we are going to say we're going to go local, we've got to have solutions for SMEs, and they do not have the level of sophistication to have HR systems or even quality job descriptions to be able to use AI to match against. And so we need to be coming up with solutions for them, and that's a space that we're going to be digging deeper into.
Great. Maybe the other pillar that I think we spent a little bit of time on is kind of partnerships more broadly, and partnerships that we have with places like local community colleges. Can you talk a little bit about what's kind of exciting for us in that space right now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so first of all, everybody's investing in community colleges, and yet, community colleges are still not expected to be having commitments to getting people placed into jobs. And so we are working with community college systems to innovate around saying, what if you were committed to ensuring that these individuals get placed into jobs? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. A, because they serve large populations, B, because they serve large immigrant populations, and our communities do organically go to them, and they're offering English language. So there's a huge population to serve there. And then really helping them have their career coaches or career counselors being equipped to help their folks find professional work, and then using our suite of services. So our coaching model and our suite of services then to be able to accelerate that for their students. And with these, employer tools, I mean, that's the hardest part for most of our partners is how do we partner with employers? How do we understand what employers need? And being able to do that at scale, I think is going to be critical.
It's a great point around scale. I know we've talked about a few ways in which we're planning to go about doing that, and working with these partners being one of them. Um, so that's very exciting. I know in the last few minutes that we have together here, would love to kind of reiterate, and maybe Jina, you can share how folks can get more involved and be able to support us and the great mission.
Yeah, so I would say this is going to take a village. I would also say, Upwardly Global, we really, for us, it's important to show up as good partners in the coalitions we serve in, but also to be good partners. And not only to the partners that we're trying to build capacity of, but, a Welcome.us, which is doing incredible work on sponsorship and who we really want to see succeed, or a Welcoming America, who is doing incredible work in building the business case and really motivating cities to take a deep step towards inclusion for immigrants. And so for us, it's really how are we connecting the dots as partners to be working together in meaningful ways to leverage each of our muscles. So I would say this is a call to our partners to sort of say, let's get on a call, let's round up, let's figure out how we're going to do this together. And the together for us is how do we ensure that we are continuing to create models and success around immigrant workforce inclusion in our cities, in our states, and trying to keep as much open as we can at the federal level. I would say we're going to have to lean heavily on volunteers and mentors at this stage, especially as we expand to these local communities. And so I would also say, like, we're going to need volunteers to be helping the Miami-Dades, to be helping the job centers, to be helping people who are coming through the sponsorship program as refugees. And so we know, well, that's a muscle we need to build, and it takes a lot of work to do volunteer management. I'm going to be honest with you, it takes a ton of work. We are going to be leaning on individuals that way. And then lastly, uh, uh, lastly is really, your time is critical if you're sharing that with us, and also your treasure. If you are capable and able and wanting to invest in a good cause, setting up sort of a monthly donation, big or small, as it makes sense, actually gives us a lot of sustainability as an organization on something we can count on and know we have there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Gina, and really appreciate the time from all the folks who've joined us and spent the hour with us today. We really appreciate it and really value you guys in our community. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.